making its infamous landfall, Hurricane Michael is still a Category 3 as it enters the state of Georgia. Making its infamous landfall, Hurricane Michael is still a Category 3 as it enters the state of Georgia. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Force 13 Live, hopefully with slightly less audio issues this time around. Thank you all so much for tuning in and staying here as we do begin this live stream again. We're hopefully going to be on the air for the next hour or two, and with that being said, I do have the team with me consisting of Ethan, Nathan, David, and Devin. How are all of you doing this evening?
Fine.
So,
doing just fine.
If anyone's
And
wondering why I'm not taking tonight's live stream, it's well, I've been working very hard over the course of this evening preparing for a potential live stream tomorrow or tonight local time in the Philippines when this storm is probably going to be making landfall. So
Yeah. I do have.
Hey,
Oh, go on.
sorry, Thomas. Just welcoming our Facebook viewers.
So hello to all of you over on Facebook. If you have any questions, just tag Force13. David will let us know, and we'll talk from there. Something interesting to note, if you guys can see some RAM rapid scan imagery here, we have this eye feature really starting to pop back out again, at least in my opinion, compared to where it was. And now we do have a completely connected -70 ring. While it's not very large at its weakest point, it's definitely back. So I don't think that's good news for the Philippines. What are your thoughts on it?
Well,
something's going on.
yeah, this
It's well, it's straddling the border between Category 2 and 3.
and has been doing so for a little bit now. Taking a look at, well, I don't really have latest infrared imagery, unfortunately. I'm gonna have to back out and go elsewhere to try to find it.
Well, on my screen we got long-range floater imagery. This gives you an idea of what it's looked like in the last, 6 or 7 hours. Gives you a bit of a wider picture on where we're at right now with this storm status. And you can see how much it's progressed in that period of time. It is actually, by the looks of things, Thomas, moving slightly west-southwest in that period.
I gotta tell you what, though, here's the thing, is that the latest image that I can find of this storm is at 1 Zulu. It is now, what we got, 140.
Yeah, that's.
I think that, and taking a look at how it looked at one, looked like that the eye was starting to come back out.
Well, the imagery I'm showing here, it is visible, but that goes up to 120, 119.
And one thing I also noticed there on the visible is that the eye was also looking to start becoming clearer, especially in those latest few frames. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here with the imagery, but what I can say is that I'm pretty sure once the new images end up coming out of this storm, I think it's going to be pretty clear that it's going to be stronger than what we're looking at the start of this stream, to say the least.
I think that's true. And Nathan, you have some other imagery there too.
Geocolor imagery as well of the storm's progress. That goes up to, looking at timestamp there, 107. So it's a little bit older. That shows pretty much what it looks like from up in space from the Himawari 8 satellite. And I guess you get a sense of the size of this storm. I don't think we properly heard about the warnings as well, but Signal 1 warnings extending far up into central Luzon and now as far as the northern periphery of Mindanao. So a very large area that's now under warnings, and here's the reason why.
Yeah, and you can see on the left side of your screen on this left bar I have, what's going to roll by every once in a while are those warnings, Signal 1, Signal 2, and Signal 3, so you can see exactly what warnings we are looking at. You can also see the CDPS scale rating over there as well, the stage 7, and you can see exactly why that's there as well.
Devon, could you tell us a bit about CDPS stage 7, what that means?
So CDPS stage 7, obviously that means a very, very, very significant storm, borderline catastrophic. When you're talking about a stage 8 plus, that's when you're talking about a historic landfall, but still stage 6, stage 7, multi-billion-dollar disaster if it would end up hitting the US. Obviously, the Philippines stuff costs a little bit less, so it's not comparing apples to oranges, to say the least. But at the same time, stage 7, it's still a definitely potentially catastrophic system here. does anybody have the full point rating by any chance?
The point rating that I got was a 44.6.
44.6.
So
I think I
that's
got
0.9
40
points
or
away
41.
from stage 8 is what I got. Nathan got lower than me.
A little bit lower. Mid-range stage 7.
Right. So, well, I know the reason why we're calling the discrepancies on that. So, if we're gonna talk about something in the low 40s, still scrolling through here. Let's see here. We've got a storm that is analogous to Hurricane Matthew going through the Bahamas.
Yeah. Thomas, I'm going to try and get this imagery back in just a minute, if that's all right.
Yep, that is fine. New imagery has come in on the rapid scan up to 119 UTC. And definitely more of that clearing out that Devin was talking about is certainly there of the eye feature.
Yep.
It is certainly more clear. We're now seeing lots of minus 50s starting to appear. Those weren't there just a little bit ago, really.
It is visible up to 127, 129.
Here we go. Oh.
And you can see how the colors inside the eye there are getting to be darker, and since that's visible imagery, that means there's less cloud in between the camera and the sea, so that's obviously going to be a deeper eye.
That is true. So yeah, definitely concerning to say the least, assuming this thing has about 12 more hours as well to intensify before it does make landfall. Because I think current projected landfall time, at least my projected landfall time, was 15Z. Land interaction would probably start hindering its intensification just before. So would you say 15Z is a reasonable landfall time as of now?
Oh. Well, I mean, the big question is where. Because at this rate, it's not going to make landfall on Catanduanes. It's going to make landfall on the southern tip of Luzon. In fact, it's sort of... I really hope that this isn't doing a sly little milor.
Well, that would be really interesting because that would involve it, intensifying and then hitting the island, then weakening and then re-intensifying and on the other side of the island.
I'm talking more about where it ends up going, because Melor skimmed the northern part of Samar, and at the moment this storm is still moving west-southwest. It's on track for a landfall there.
Yeah, and I mean,
this storm is definitely moving to the south of west right now, but that is likely just a low-scale level. I don't think that that's the proper motion of the storm. It should turn more back to a due west movement in the next couple of hours here.
Due west,
what you can see on that visible imagery is that, especially in those late images there, on the southern side of the eye, more convective blow-ups, a big blow-up in those last frames. There it goes again. And I think you'll end up seeing that on the infrared very shortly, Thomas.
Yeah, we can already see a little bit of that. Not to the extent that I'm seeing on your screen, but I am seeing a little bit.
Let me just stop it there.
Blow up.
There's the last few frames there in slow. Well, not that one, but there it is, blowing up there in those last few frames.
You can see that boom. We don't quite have that on infrared yet. It actually happens.
I see a pretty strong blow up on the southern end here in the infrared, at least coming up here on the 19Z image. I know that's still a half an hour out of date. Ugh. But
yeah, I see it too now.
But there's definitely a blow up that is getting going here. So we're pretty much just waiting for the newest images to come across, because this storm definitely does look like that it's starting to get more of its act back together. maybe starting to look more like 115 miles an hour than 105. Maybe it was just a temporary weakening phase. We'll have to see.
Yeah, we certainly will. Certainly a very interesting storm and a very dangerous one for the Philippines. So those in the Philippines should be keeping an eye on this all the way up until and after this storm's landfall, as it does have a very significant threat. Again, a stage 7 on the CDPS scale. That is nothing to sneeze at. That's an extremely dangerous storm and something that needs to be taken very seriously.
And again, there's more of that blow up. Another 10 minutes of imagery here, and you can see it almost blowing up right over the eye in that last frame there.
That's
a big one.
interesting.
Although I must say the northwestern side, at least on the visible, not looking so hot in those last frames. It looks a little bit.
It's not looking very good on infrared either.
And the northern side has always been the side that's been struggling from day one. Well, from when it became a typhoon, at least.
Yeah, that northern side has definitely been a little bit of an issue, at least with the convection. If you take a look at the microwave, it's a little bit different. I think it's the eastern side that's struggled. But it's pretty common that what you see on IR isn't necessarily the same that you would see on microwave. But yeah, the northern and northwestern side specifically have been issues with this storm. And that just has to do with the fact that this storm was just pounded nonstop with shear for 48 hours and really disrupted the core of the storm, really disrupted the wholesale structure of the storm. So it's been trying its best to pull itself back together.
Yeah, because that shear did just absolutely tear it apart. So now it's kind of having to rise back out from the ashes, if you will, that it had really as resources after the shear. Now it is in better conditions, and we are expecting a slow intensification trend all the way up until landfall in the Philippines. Expect a major typhoon landfall. It's not going to be a pleasant experience for anyone in the path of this storm. Someone in the chat was mentioning the fact that the European model is calling for 175 miles per hour still on this storm. Wind pressure wouldn't say that, but the wind parameter does. That's pretty much out of the question at this point. That's not happening. And I think the rest of the team would agree with me. Would you say 175 is pretty much out of the question?
Yes.
Yes. I would hope so. Devin, what about you?
You know, well,
you better say yes.
Much just wishful thinking at this point.
Yeah, no.
I'm just looking at your imagery on the screen now as well. Yeah, that northern side, just off towards the west there, looking a little bit loose. Whether it comes back again, I mean that we'll watch. But considering that massive flare up on the southern side of the eye recently, wouldn't surprise me at all if it extended all the way around pretty soon.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing this really start to wrap around the storm, this flare up. Other interesting thing is that we do have now some minus 40 starting to appear in that northern side, that weakened convection in the northern side. Interesting thing is we still have that minus 60, minus 70 band that is below it, if you will, closer to the eye wall. And it looks like this minus 80s, this, I guess you could say, tidal wave of minus 80s, if you will, is probably going to brush right over that. And I think we're going to be seeing this wrap all the way around pretty soon, especially assuming that that convection does wrap all the way around.
Yep.
This is as of 1:30 UTC.
That thing is that convection's got to wrap all the way around, and it's got to sustain itself for at least a 6-hour period in order for it to really be something meaningful on satellite. So that's something that's got to maintain itself. Like, we got it wrapped around earlier today, but it didn't maintain, so it wasn't necessarily meaningful. We're trying to get this storm right now. What it needs to do is wrap around and maintain. You can see on the rapid scan imagery that there is definitely a bit of the eye trying to come out, but also there is a little bit of a weakness on the northern side here, also peeking through. So obviously that would need to be completely cut off. We would need to have this entire circle at least embedded with these oranges. We can't have the green and especially no blues in the central dense overcast if you want the storm to intensify from the way that it is right now. So if you're looking for intensification, you really want to have uniformity here, and uniformity we do not have. You can clearly see we have a very asymmetric blow up here happening on the southern side. On the northern side here, we've got a very well defined cut, meaning that dry air is still getting in. That's got to be cut off before we can go ahead and fully get this thing wrapped around here. So, again, it all comes down to those structural issues that the storm's dealing with. You can see it definitely trying to do so. You can see it trying to wrap these big -70, -80 cloud tops all the way around. But it's just the storm structural issues. It just can't maintain it. So it ends up just collapsing and then it gets back into this state again and it just goes back and forth. So that's pretty much what's been going on with this. It's just been a back and forth struggle of can it maintain its structural integrity. So far, it hasn't.
And it really only has one or two more shots at this. If it fails this time around, it's only really got one more time before landfall. So, I mean, especially with the dry slot that we're really starting to see, that dry kink really starting to come in, I'm really starting to have my doubts that this thing's going to be able to maintain its structure to an extent it can intensify rapidly or significantly from here before landfall.
And that's interesting coming from you, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that this is necessarily a death sentence here. This definitely isn't a death sentence from the storm.
No.
It's just right now it needs to get this slot out of here and close itself off. If it can do that, the conditions are more than favorable for this thing to shoot right up, which is why the HWRF suggests it and the ECMWF suggests it. The conditions
Do we have any updated model runs?
I don't know how up to date they are, but I know we have these model runs here. I have them pulled up. This is the latest runs. It's interesting. CHP6, which is supposed to be your really upper bound model, showing a peak that is about where the storm's at right now.
Right now?
105 miles an hour.
Interesting.
Is the CHP6's peak. Obviously, it exceeded that earlier today. This was as of 18Z, so I wouldn't put too much weight into the CHP models at this point. HWRF also overestimating it, in my opinion, at this point.
Yeah. Pretty much what I was. But the only other thing I was about to say is that, yeah, I still think that the storm will steadily get itself together because the conditions definitely aren't there to weaken. The conditions are definitely favorable for strengthening. The only thing that's preventing the storm from strengthening is itself. So, and that's something that I've repeated, I don't know how many times, that the only thing that's going to get into storm's way is itself. And that's basically the situation that we have here with Kammuri. The sea surface temperatures are there.
We've said that for a lot of storms this year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've had a lot of Cat 5s this year. This is probably not going to be one of them. Very likely that it's not going to be one of them. But this storm, especially since it's only got 12 hours, it's not going to get there. But considering where this storm's headed and where it's going, you know, Cat 4 definitely still can't be rolled out with this thing, and I don't think there's really any reason for it to weaken. Maintain, probably. Strengthen a little bit can happen. The core wind speeds, I would still expect Category 3 wind speeds of 115 miles an hour from the core at landfall. I would still expect those winds.
Did you say 115 just then?
115 of at least that.
Yeah. That's about 185 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, 185 kilometers an hour. So that's what I would say to expect as a maximum, at least for the sustained winds. The gusts can obviously get higher. You would expect those to be in excess of 200 kilometers an hour, but those only last for a couple of seconds, but they're still important. But just to keep that in the back of your mind as well, that there might be 200 kilometer an hour gusts in this. In the central core, it's important to know that there isn't 200 kilometer an hour winds happening everywhere in this thing. It's just right in the core. But that's what I would expect out of the core of this thing as it moves ashore, is somewhere in that range.
Yeah, now I have the GFS ensemble guidance on the screen, and I'm thinking very close guidance on around the Virac area getting hit by the storm. What do we think the odds are? And there's been a lot of consensus that Virac was basically ground zero. What do we think the odds are that they get the landfall? I mean, it's been going south of forecast for a little bit now.
Decreasing. I would say now only around maybe 50%.
Yeah, I mean, if we go over here to the Euro, Euro takes it south.
Because if it moves west from here, you know, it's got to change its course to about 290 degrees on the compass to get to Catanduanes and not Luzon.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna, as Devon said, probably move due west.
Yeah, so it's probably gonna go south of forecast.
I mean, it has been going south of forecast.
Yeah, we have some new imagery. And this is interesting. The dry spot has gotten larger.
Ooh.
Like, it's kind of closed off. This is interesting. So it's gotten better farther north, but it's closed off in here. But it's definitely a gap of dry air that's just sitting there. And the eye is definitely starting to clear out.
Yeah, so that's not going to be closed off, Ethan, because you still don't have the reds going all the way around on the outer radius of the storm. That's very important, that you need the uniform going all the way around, even the outer radius. There, you might have that little inner thing going around the eye where you have you've got the reds going all the way around the eye, but you really need the entire central dense overcast to go away. So that slot definitely still there. That's definitely still annoying. The eye is definitely clearing out. That's definitely getting very interesting there. We'll see how long that's able to be maintained, or if a convection blow up ends up making it disappear again. That only time will be able to tell about that.
Yeah, we'll see. Worst case scenario for the Philippines is we get a convection blow up on the northern side. At this point.
Yeah. Well, I've just been doing some deep digging because I've been looking at some trivia regarding this storm. Now, we saw that it was a Category 1 for 4.5 days. That is the longest time a storm has spent at Category 1 without changing anywhere in the world since Typhoon Fito in 2007, when it was a Category 4 for 8 days, Category 1 for 8 days in a row.
Wow.
So just thought that might be interesting.
You do have a few questions here. Do we think this storm will continue to move due west?
Yes.
I would agree. I think.
Really, I mean, it's not. It's moving a little bit south of west right now. It's not moving exactly due west right now. It's moving a little bit south of west, but it is expected to curve itself to be moving due west, and should be making landfall somewhere in the southern tip of Luzon.
Yeah,
now, I don't have Thomas's fancy pen, so I can't draw my own tracks on the satellite imagery. But if I was to draw a track, I'd be pointing it somewhere where my cursor is. So, there you go. I don't know if you can see it on there, Thomas.
No, I drew a little circle where you drew your track on mine. That's where that Not the first storm that became a half circle because I drew it at the wrong spot, but the second one, that's where Nathan thinks this storm's landfall could be. Yeah, definitely interesting. So Nathan, any new developments on the visible imagery side of things?
All right, I'm gonna go get another loop on that and see where we're at.
Got it. We do have a new image or two on the infrared, and that dry spot keeps on getting a little bigger. The eye temperature keeps on rising, so looks like it's a race right now.
There's some more recent imagery you can see there in those latest frames. Again, that massive blow up on the southern side is continuing to extend over the eye itself by the looks of things. And what you can see is quite pronounced, that dry slot just to the northwest of the eye right now as well that you've seen on the infrared.
So what are you at? 42? I'm looking at 42 as well, and I can really
49.
see, you can really see it on the infrared as well. I'm at 42. But anyways, I can really see here on the infrared, you can just see a giant, it's like a mushroom just blooming at the top of the storm. Very, very pretty here in the infrared.
What are those cloud top temperatures in that?
Minus 90s. Like mid minus 90s.
Wow, keeps blowing up.
Yeah. I can't tell. I'm not used to this color imagery, honestly.
As for movement, though, well, latest imagery there, it doesn't strike me as moving particularly fast. And I guess that's why it's going to be 12 hours plus before landfall. But I mean, you know, all the models saying it's going to be a pretty straightforward thing. My God, I hope this thing doesn't stall.
Oh, no, it won't. West at 13 is real-time ATCF's latest.
13 miles per hour or not?
13 miles an hour. So around 10-ish knots.
All right. Yeah, just continuing to look at that imagery as you are. Just trying to figure out whether the eye is continuing to bottom out there. I think so.
I do too. That eye is really starting to pop out. The question is really, I think this eye is going to be able to successfully pop out at least for a little bit. Will this blow up of convection cover up the eye and obscure it again? And will this dry spot, will Kammuri be able to get that dry spot out? And I don't know if it's going to be able to.
Well, you know, everyone has been wanting, well, a lot of people we've been seeing wanting the storm to intensify quite a bit. Certainly expecting it to. I'm certainly not one of those. But if, let's just say, if the Philippines weren't there, this would probably become a Category 5 storm.
I mean, perhaps. I mean, it would have a lot more time to do it. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I'm questioning whether this will even get to Category 4 at this point.
It is definitely a questionable thing whether if it can get there or not. It really just depends on time because of what we've been saying. The conditions are definitely there for the storm, but again, the storm seems to be getting in its own way in regards to intensifying. So you can see the eye getting better. You can see the convective blowup getting better. So you can see these things, but then you realize the eye shape is just asymmetric. It's terrible. And then you see the CDO shape. It's not a circle. It's got a giant notch in it. It's not well defined.
Despite that, I'm still getting Milor vibes on. That was the Philippine named Nona that struck in a similar time period in 2015. I'm still getting vibes from that, particularly in track, maybe just a slightly weaker version.
And obviously the storm was much, much larger than Malheur.
Indeed it is. That is another big factor. As a matter of fact, I'm just looking at a picture of Milor, and this storm is probably double size.
At least.
In cloud coverage, double. Wind field, I'm not sure.
Someone asking, do we think that after this storm moves into the South China Sea, it will recurve back into the Philippines? I think that's a no.
Bopa nearly did that in 2012, but no.
Very, very unlikely at this point.
No, I started this off by saying that the storm is going to move pretty much at its current pace through the Philippine Islands. It's going to move into the South China Sea. There may be a brief re-intensification phase as soon as it ends up moving back over waters. But once that ends up happening, the core is going to be so disrupted that any type of shear that may hit the storm will automatically just destroy it. And that's what is forecasted to happen after 72 hours, is that the storm is expected to move south and move to just an absolutely very harsh condition of very high shear in the South China Sea, and that will just completely make the storm devoid of any kind of convection rather quickly.
Yeah, someone else asking, do you think Kammuri will become a Category 4 or 5 typhoon? Definitely not a 5 in my opinion. I'd give it about a 40% chance of becoming a Category 4 at this point.
Yeah, as well as what we've got in front of our eyes, the satellite imagery, there's two other things we can look at when we're predicting the possible intensity. We've got obviously the model spread, which none of them are now calling for a Category 5, so you got to say the chances of that are going to be 1% or less. And then you've got climatology, where we look at storms of Kammuri's current intensity within a certain distance of it, say 100 miles, and how many of them went on to become Category 5s. My guess, I'm about to find out, is probably going to be none. From what Category 2 as it is right now, and in the month of December, I think the answer is going to be none, but I'll search all months and see what we find. I'll let you know.
Yeah, some new imageries come in on the rapid scan. We're still continuing to see this convective blow up starting to wrap around the center. We're seeing this dry kink in the northern side continuing to expand by the looks of it, which isn't good news for Kammuri. But that eye continues to clear out. It looks awful, but it's certainly an eye.
Yeah, so what's going on here? Go ahead and refresh
I can tell
my
you,
images.
well, I can tell you one storm that was pretty interesting. Zhang Sein in 2006 was a Category 1 in pretty much this storm's current position and managed to make landfall as a Cat 4.
And probably a storm that was much smaller than this one as well.
Probably. Well, that is another thing, isn't it? We are talking about, as you've said, a large storm. It's not even a Milor. It's double the size of that, and that should imply, Devon, quote me if I'm wrong, but double the time needed to intensify that much.
It would really, well, you got also, not necessarily that, because you have to realize that the intensity is going to be integrated over the area of the storm. So really, you're talking about not radius, but radius squared. So it's actually going to be 4 times as much. If we're talking,
I figured that might have been the case.
Yeah. So if we're talking double the radius, you need 4 times as much energy. So so that really even further plays in favor of not having rapid intensification. The eye is definitely getting clearer, yes, but at the same time, it's getting more elliptical, more ragged. The dry slot is not going away. The northwestern part of the
potential densification of the storm is terrible. The blow up is starting to cover the eye, which is at least good for us because that's a sign that the storm is not necessarily strengthening. It's not necessarily weakening either, but it's not strengthening at the moment.
I think
We're
David's
just
got some stuff for us.
Yep, go ahead, David.
What is the expected kilometers per hour in Pampanga, Philippines? And another viewer is reporting forced evacuations. Not sure what the location is. Also, power outages. Not sure what area. And quite a few education facilities have closed.
Well, Pampanga, that's to the northwest of Manila. Estimated chances of tropical storm conditions, that is gales of 60 kilometers per hour or higher, you're at about a 58% chance. I would suggest that tropical storm force winds will probably occur. You'll probably receive signal 2 conditions, most likely. If the storm takes an unexpected turn towards the north, you might see signal 3, but at the moment, we're not looking like that right now.
And then that
Nathan,
actually,
sorry, Thomas, go.
That leads into another question. Someone asking, what are the main threats to Manila? The wind, the rain, or both? I think the rain is going to be the biggest threat for Manila.
Now, obviously, we don't know the geography as well as people locally do. I don't think any of us here have been to the Philippines, but from what we've seen tracking these storms over the course of about 6 years, I think the first big one that I tracked was Bopa, a Philippine named Pablo. But flooding is always a massive thing in this when it's not as strong as those Category 5s. So, you know, the Manila area, all of the built-up areas, places that are prone to flooding, and we're talking about the upper territory of what we expect in rainfall when it comes to tropical cyclones, up to 500 millimeters of rain, which is quite a lot. It's 20 inches. There could be severe flooding, torrential rain, and given the size of these cloud tops, you would expect that they're harboring huge rain rates under them as well.
Yeah, we got new satellite imagery, new rapid scan. And again, yeah, we're starting to see that convection obscure the eye a little bit, but that eye temperature continues to increase, and that dry slot continues to expand. It just gets larger and larger and larger, and we're starting to really see these minus 60s and minus 70s thin away from the northwestern side of the storm.
It continues to become more pronounced on visible imagery as we continue to watch here. The latest one I've got now is 1:59 UTC, and local time that's 9:59.
I also have 1:59 UTC, and it looks like that the blow up is pretty much going to cover the eye within the next 5 minutes worth of imagery as of 1:59. And although you are correct, the convection is wrapping around to the northern part of the eye wall. The dry slot itself is also moving. That's not getting any smaller. It's just rotating around the storm.
It's actually getting larger, in my opinion.
Yeah,
yep,
exactly.
I agree.
That's not getting any smaller. If anything, that's getting bigger. So,
well, I'll tell you what we've got right now. I know we're looking at the same imagery, Thomas, but I can tell you what we've got right now. It's starting to get a bit of a Pac-Man appearance.
Oh, yes.
The Pac-Man appearance,
yeah.
Really...
Well, we're a little bit of... Well, if that dry slot wraps all the way around to the southwestern portion, we're going to get a 9 appearance.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I don't think it'll make it.
I think you're showing again the latest visible here on my screen. So again, that big flare-up that's happened in the last 30 minutes, continuing to wrap around the eastern side of Kammuri's eye. Of course, the local name in the Philippines is Tisoy. And we expect landfall in about 12 hours. Would you say at most or at least?
I'd say that. I don't
At
know.
least.
It's pretty close. I'd say at least,
At
yeah.
least. Definitely at least. It would be in the range of 12 to 15 hours.
So there is a possibility we'll be running more live coverage this evening local time. I'll be
Yes.
taking that. But it depends whether we see the storm intensifying or not. Nonetheless, Force 13 will have regular updates, whether it's in live format or video format.
Do have another question. Could this storm stall?
No.
Well, there we go.
We have gotten a question similar to that earlier on in the stream, and I'm gonna address it in a similar way. No, this storm's not going to be like a Dorian type situation where it comes over land and it just stalls. This storm is going to have pretty much a constant motion of 10, 12 knots through the Philippine Islands. When you start receiving gale force winds, it'll be a 36 to 48 hour time span, depending on where you are. Manila, it's probably going to be closer to 48 hours. The landfall area, probably closer to 36. But it's going to be a 36 to 48 hour time span for the amount of time that you actually receive the 50 to 60 kilometer per hour winds. So this isn't going to be a situation where the 150 mile an hour winds actually stay over the same area for a day or two. That's not happening here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to show my picture, Thomas, but another different infrared view to the one that you've been showing for most of the stream. Showing off again those massive cloud tops that are in white there. Any of the grayish white colors are beyond -80, which is black. And you see plenty of -90s there. What you can also see is that it's influencing the weather as far south as the southern tip of Mindanao, and also as far west now as Palawan. And you just saw one or two very initial bands moving through the Metro Manila area in the last 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah. We do have a couple other questions here. First one: since the center is exposed, is the eye going to be unstable and raggedy?
Oh, the center's not exposed. That's not necessarily what we're trying to say here. The center is not necessarily exposed in this. It is still well within the CDO. So we haven't reached a situation where it's like shear is just blowing the convection off the storm. So the center is not necessarily exposed. Can you repeat the second part of the question? I've already forgotten it.
Is the eye going to be unstable and raggedy?
Okay, so the eye, yes, it's going to be unstable and raggedy while during this entire frame. Well, I don't think the eye is going to be very visible for much longer. We're at the 159Z, and the convection's pretty much already overtaken it. So I suspect the next time that we get new imagery out, that eye is probably going to be gone.
Yeah. I'd agree. We have another question. I think this one will have a pretty simple answer. Will this storm turn around and go east?
No.
No. There's nothing that could possibly make that happen.
No, that's not going to happen. It's going to move. It's going to move due west or just north of west as it makes landfall. And we'll move west-northwest through the Philippines. It'll go well into the South China Sea, and then it'll turn west-southwest. I'm sorry, south-southwest, and then die.
Yeah, sounds pretty accurate to me. I'm just going to check and see if we have any new imagery on the rapid scan. No, we don't just yet. Another question: how bad could the flooding be in Cebu City? Well, significant rainfall is expected to occur there, so flooding could be fairly bad. Last I checked, it was around 15, 16 inches, if possible. If I have my
Down
geography
there?
right.
No, I don't think
No?
so.
Where's Cebu City? I thought it was farther north.
That's in the Visayas region, central.
Central Visayas? Oh, okay then. It won't be quite that much. But maybe 7 or 8 inches, wouldn't you say? I mean, if it's Central Visayas region, this thing goes south of
All right,
forecast, the convection
just a
is
minute.
southerly biased.
That's true.
So,
Let me just try and find out on that. We don't want to give an answer that. We'll come back to that in just a minute.
well, Nathan is crunching those numbers. See if we have any other questions here. No
One
other
from
questions
Facebook.
at this time. All right, what do we got from Facebook, David?
Dale James. Now, MARINTUQUE on, will it be directly hit?
Marinduque was that?
Yes.
Now that is one of the small islands just to the south of central Luzon. So yes, that could be a potential landfall. That would be tomorrow.
Devin, we have new imagery, but it's just
And,
about 3 minutes.
Just a minute. I would just like to answer the previous question as well about Cebu. Possibly, we're expecting up to 100 millimeters of rain.
Can I ask Nathan this question? Can we see a signal 4 being issued?
Well, if they did warnings for sea areas, I'd have signal 4 out there right now near the center of the storm. So I think they will and they ought to issue signal 4 warnings because we are calling, signal 4 warning starts halfway through category 2 on the Sappho-Simpson scale, and it's at least that. So, yeah, as soon, if Pegasa think that there's any areas that are going to get the landfall within the next 12 hours, they should put it under signal 4.
As far as I'm concerned, I think that signal 4 warning should be put on for the southern tip of Luzon and the northern
Samar.
northern part there, of Sumon, because there's also a possibility that the eye might just graze that island, and then the Corps can get those 115 plus mile an hour winds. So I think signal 4 warning should be there as well.
Just spotted a very interesting question about whether Kammuri's cloud top temperatures beat the world record. And no, it tied the world record.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a South Pacific storm that ended up happening. I think its name was Hilda. I remember correctly.
Hilda, 1990.
Yeah. We also had Tatiana, which is close. I think that was -101 though.
I never looked into that one. I do know that I think it was Sempaka in the South Indian had -100.
Yeah, but I know that Tatiana was at least -100. For those that don't remember Tatiana, you don't remember it because Winston happened in the same time.
And I think we've got 2,700 people stranded at the port. I think it's Bicol, BICOL. 2719 persons in the ports as of Monday morning. Philippine Coast Guard reports.
See, Devin, have you seen this new imagery yet up to 202?
Yeah, I got the 202 image, but that's all that I got. Pretty much just a continuation of 157. That blob is taking over the eye with a vengeance.
Yeah, pretty much. That eye will probably be gone by the next update. If not the next update, definitely the update after that, I would think. Nathan, do we have anything on visible that would indicate that eye is pretty much gone?
All right, I'll get it back in just one short minute here.
Got it.
All right, here is latest visible imagery. So, not much different really. I mean, I don't think that convection will cover the whole eye. The eye is moving towards the west, and the convection is not really going to be taking over, but still, it's covered half the eye. And still, what this, I mean, this, you're saying it's a dry slot. To me, it looks suspiciously like an eye that's open to the west here.
I mean, we'll have to
Man,
see.
that looks really good on visible.
Yeah. Doesn't look quite as pleasing on infrared, though.
No, it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great on IR, but definitely looks like a 150 mile an hour system. But when you take a look at it on infrared, it's like, ooh, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Still no new images. Come on, man.
Yeah, that's what
Are
I'm
we
doing.
half an hour out of date again?
Constantly refreshing here.
Ugh.
It's a fun time. Alright, we do have someone else saying, how large is this storm north to south, east to west?
Pretty large. I mean, it's not huge. I can
No,
give you
it's
a
not
rough
necessarily
estimate.
huge, but it's not small either. When you're talking about, well, we
The
usually
cloud
measure the
coverage
size
of
of
the
the.
storm,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
is about 480 miles north to south, so that's about 750 kilometers. And someone did ask east to west. I would say something like 400 miles, which is nearly 700 kilometers
It's about what
wide.
we got.
And if you're, and when you're talking about when you're talking about how far the tropical storm force winds, which are about those 60 kilometer per hour winds, there is a maximum diameter of it, which basically says how far do the winds extend from one side of the storm to the other side, is about 520 kilometers maximum from one edge of the storm to the other, 520 kilometers.
Yeah, still checking for new imagery on that rapid scan. Nothing just yet. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask us. We'll be more than glad to answer them. We're going to be remaining on the air for just half an hour longer before we do go off the air here. But thank you so much for watching so far. We're going to do everything we can to help you out. Just ask us any questions that you can. We will be answering them as accurately as we can at this time. So yeah, with that being said, that eye continues to clear, but it looks like this convection will overtake it when we do get some new frames. We'll see. Did get some new frames now up to 212, and it looks like that eye is going to manage to survive, but it's certainly not looking all that good right now. But at
Well, it
least to
won't.
me,
It's been, the eye's hidden, isn't it?
yeah,
It's being obscured. Not so much it's disappearing, it's just being hidden from view.
and by this convective
Well,
blow up,
at least the deepest part of it.
certainly. Yeah, on
Oh
visible.
boy,
There's a
yeah,
lot
we're
of-
up to 214 now.
A lot of questions that just came in there about Manila, chance of getting hit by tropical storm force winds. They are something like 75-80% chance. It's pretty certain. Davao, that's right in the southern central part of Mindanao. Not really going to get significant wind effects from this storm, and you'll probably get some fleeting rain showers. I don't think it's going to be anything too significant. And Palawan Island. Now, obviously, it's a long and thin island, so it really depends where on Palawan Island. Obviously, further north will get the worst effects. I expect that it won't really be worse than Signal 1, maybe some isolated Signal 2 conditions.
Someone just asked, is the storm starting to resemble an annular typhoon? No.
Don't mention the A word.
No. Absolutely not.
Not even close. An annular type system would require a completely clear eye, would require a perfectly circular uh, uh, it would require a perfectly circular central dense overcast or CDO, and would require a perfectly circular and clear eye with minimal bands. What do you see here? Well, you see a giant convective band to the south. We see no circular pattern to the eye whatsoever, and we see a massive dry slot in the western side of this storm. So it fails the test on all three ways you look at it. So yeah, definitely not an annular storm. It's not trying to become an annular storm. Even if this does end up becoming a Category 4, it still wouldn't be an annular storm.
Yeah. Definitely an impressive storm either way. Certainly
I'm not
nothing to
saying
be
that it's
messed
not
with.
impressive. I'm just saying it's definitely not an annular one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, this dry notch in the storm remains, and it's getting very close to the eye here. Looks like that now it's starting to become pretty much the northwestern side. Um, looks like that convection on the eye wall is really starting to fizzle away here, and could lead to some direct intrusion into the eye wall, like more direct than what we're already seeing. Could even
That
open up to
would
the
be
eye.
Yeah, that would obviously be catastrophic to the structure of the storm if that ended up happening. I definitely wouldn't place a bet on that right now, but that would be catastrophic in terms of structural integrity to the storm if this were to completely open up on the western side.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, that's nothing but good news for wherever this storm is going because that significant weakening ahead. But right now, significant weakening probably not on the cards. The storm has pretty much been maintaining its intensity since the overnight hours. This storm right now 105. It's been fluctuating between 105 and 115 pretty much the entire night, and slight intensification is expected to continue throughout the afternoon as winds are expected to get in excess of 115 miles an hour eventually before a landfall in roughly 12 to 15 hours somewhere along southern Luzon.
Yeah, that is currently what's expected. If we take a look at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's map, they are saying currently they are predicting a 115 mile per hour landfall in the Philippines, with it being 110 miles an hour just after the 24-hour forecast point. They are making it go to the southern tip of Luzon, pretty close to there now, so they have given this a significantly southward shift in the forecast compared to previous forecasts.
That is pretty much correct. That's right in line with what we're observing with this storm right now.
Yeah, it would be pretty much what would be expected at this point.
What do we got in terms of comments?
Uh, not much in terms of new comments. Um, at this point.
Got anything new, David?
Nothing at this stage.
All right.
But I'm monitoring the Twitter feeds and
And you're not seeing anything in regards to signal forewarnings being posted for anywhere?
no, it's mainly signal ones, twos, threes, and education centres to close around midday Philippine time.
All right.
Yeah, but again, here we go. Someone asking, what do we think the intensity is? Do we think 110 miles per hour at this point?
At this point, at this point, I'm personally in the field of saying that I had a decent eye before. So I would personally be in the field of maintaining it at 115, its previous intensity before the eye descended to end up going away. So I would hold it at 115 rather than 105. But that's just depending on if you believe that it maintained its appearance for 115 long enough to call it 115. I thought it did. Some people don't, so those people will end up saying 105 right now. Or you could take the middle road and say 110. Pretty much, it's just a matter of perspective. There's no way to really pin down what it would actually be without a plane actually flying in there and telling us what it is. And we don't have that in the so somewhere in the range of 105 to 115 right now is what we would consider to be the maximum 1 minute sustained wind speed for the storm.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty reasonable. I'd go with 105 at this time. But either way, I mean, that's just subjective at this point. 10 miles an hour isn't going to be a huge difference, but still, that is the difference between Category 2 and 3. Regardless of what it is now, I'm fairly certain it'll be a Category 3 by the time it does make landfall in the Philippines. I think we can all agree it'll be at least a Category 3.
Yeah, it should be unequivocally a Category 3 by the time it approaches landfall in the Philippines, whenever that ends up happening. Well, wherever that ends up happening, I should say. But yeah, this storm, again, it's expected to strengthen throughout the day as the day continues.
Someone's saying, how rapid does intensification seem right now? It seems very slow, if it is even happening right now.
Right. So, in order for us to say that a system is rapidly intensifying, we would need to have the storm's minimum central pressure to drop 1 millibar per hour or 1 hectopascal per hour and maintain that rate for 24 hours, an entire day. We have not seen that happen. So this storm is not meeting what we would consider to have the criteria for rapid intensification.
And the Joint Typhoon Warning Center is updated.
And what does the Joint Typhoon Warning Center say, David?
Oh, give me a minute. 80 knots to 100 knots, 60 to 100 knots to 125 knots. So that really hasn't changed. Let's see what they're. I have a 409 nautical miles east-southeast of Milan, tracking westward at 10 knots, and this is over the last 6 hours. Animated and enhanced infrared satellite imagery shows that the typhoon has an improved symmetric structure with deep convection wrapping around the low-level circulation center. They have at 80 knots between a 4-8 current intensity of T 4.577 knots, SATCON estimate of 94 knots. And the SATCON estimates have spiked due to the development of the microwave eye, and the typhoon continues to enjoy favourable conditions. A vertical wind shear and sea surface temperature favourable for development.
Yeah. Someone asking if we can show visible imagery, so I'm going to pull that up real quick.
While you do that, Thomas, they're saying rapidly intensified due to favourable vertical wind shear, warm sea surface temperatures. The typhoon will reach 100 knots before making landfall within 24 hours. Then what Devon said, it will start to weaken.
Right.
And an approaching shortwave trough to the northwest will temporarily erode the steering ridge, causing the typhoon to track west-northwest in around 36 hours.
Yeah, the storm, you can see the convective blowup that's occurred And you can also see this kind of, I guess you could call it a half eye at this point. The storm looks really good on visible. The outflow looks healthy. Um, it looks like a very healthy system, very well established system. Looks much better on visible than it does on infrared. I think, Devin, you were talking about that earlier. Yeah, definitely a better looking storm.
Yeah, it's gonna look a lot better on visible than it does on infrared for reasons I've already said, due to the transparency of the clouds that you would not be able to see on infrared, because when you take a look at these infrared scans, you can only see temperatures. Obviously, the storm doesn't actually look like this, and when an infrared sensor, what it's actually doing is picking up the temperature radiation, black body radiation that's coming out of clouds. So that's what it's measuring. It's actually measuring the temperature of the cloud. So it's not actually going to be able to see through the clouds, no matter how transparent it is. It's only going to be able to see what the temperature of the cloud is.
Yeah, that is true.
Daryl is asking what's the status of the Typhoon Cat 2 on the
Yep.
SSHS.
The current status of the typhoon that we're going with here on Force 13 is 105 miles per hour, which would put it solidly in the Category 2 region on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. The current landfall index, the cyclone destruction potential scale, that is currently a stage 7, which would put it into a potentially catastrophic region of the scale. Of course, an 8 or higher being definitely catastrophic, or 5 or 6 being definitely a natural disaster. 7 kind of falls right in the middle of those two. If it were to hit the US, it would be a multi-billion-dollar disaster. And of course, that's apples to oranges compared to the Philippines. So that's why I say hit in the US. Definitely a significant threat when we're talking 20 to 25 inches worth of rain that is expected to fall with this storm, along with significant tides due to the storm being as large as it is, like I said, over 500 kilometers in diameter, along with wind speeds that are expected to be at or in excess of 115 miles per hour at landfall. So when you combine all three of those things together, you consider the storm is a stage 7, definitely a very dangerous storm that we're dealing with here approaching the Philippines.
Certainly. Someone asking if the dry slot doesn't make it to the eye, could this become a perfectly symmetrical? Could this have a perfectly symmetrical eye?
No. Well, I said no because I thought you were talking about the cloud tops. The eye can definitely become symmetrical. I don't think it has enough time to do it. But in regards to the CDO of the storm, it's never going to get symmetrical because the land's going to interact with it by the time the dry slot closes. So it's not going to get that symmetrical look. Taking a look at this now, we're at 220 now on the rapid scan, which is about 27 minutes ago. And that convective blowup is just looking really impressive on the eastern part of the storm. And now that dry slot's moved completely over to the western part of the storm, and the eye is not looking good. It hasn't gotten any warmer. If anything, it's starting to cool back off.
Yeah, that's true. Someone saying, could this get to Category 5? No.
No, not at
No.
this point. A less than 1% chance of it getting to Category 5.
Not enough time.
This isn't. It's about time that we finally got a storm here that actually gets the conditions where it could be a Cat 5 and it doesn't get there. It's about time that we had one of those storms. Yeah, this is not going to be a Cat 5 unless something really, really strange happens.
And what would that take?
Oh, I don't know what that would be. That's why I say really strange circumstances, because I don't have any other way to describe it.
Yeah. Certainly, it is certainly a powerful system, and it's certainly that dry slot does continue to look more and more intrusive with every new frame that comes in.
So this is really good news for the Philippines that this is just completely uh this is definitely halting any sort of intensification that the storm may be trying to do.
Yes.
So very, very good news. It's not very often that we get to come onto this live stream and say, "Hey, look, we've got a storm that's rapidly approaching land, and hey, look, we actually have a sign of the storm weakening." And the dry slot only appears to be getting stronger, especially in the latest frames. When you look further to the north along the dry slot, you can see more of the blues starting to show up. So that's really starting to open up now. So just more good news coming out of the Kammuri camp here, at least for the Philippines.
Yeah, it's definitely good news for sure. And assuming this thing just continues to intrude like this could really halt intensification. And
Yeah,
if
that will halt any intensification
if
attempts.
this does create like a fracture within the eye wall that like we don't have those minus 60s wrapping all the way around anymore, which it looks like it might be doing, could we see this storm weaken?
Weaken? Well, it could. I think we would need extraordinary circumstances for it to make landfall as a Cat 1 as well. Um, weaken, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's just a mess of a storm right now.
Yeah, that's pretty much the answer of it. Yeah, it's a real mess of a storm.
Now we've got some new frames. Significant cooling has occurred on the western side of the eye. The dry slot continues to look like it's getting a little larger, and it looks like we do have a small area now of minus 50s at the
That's
very central part of the eye wall, no longer
yeah.
a complete wrap of minus
Look at that. Look
60s.
at that on the northern. If you look on the northern side of the dry slot, you can see that there is definitely an area where it's getting even weaker. And if you take a look at the northern side of the storm, you'll see some of the green colors starting to erode away at the top there as well. The eye, you see one blob. I don't really want to use this because it's definitely unscientific, but you see one part of the eye going away and another part of the eye coming back. You can see the blacks are trying to wrap around. They're not quite getting there. And you just have this massive convective blow up here on the eastern side of the storm, which honestly, convective blow up on the eastern side of the storm would have been unthinkable just 48 hours ago, considering how much shear was hitting it. But yeah, structural issues continues to halt intensification of this storm for the time being.
And we'll see if that does stay with us, because the longer that stays, the better for the Philippines.
But that central pressure's dropped. It was at 964 and it was 980. So what's that? 24 millibars that it's dropped.
It's dropped significantly since like yesterday.
Yes.
Since yesterday, it would have dropped from the 970s to somewhere in the 950s. But that's from yesterday, and almost all of that happened overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least the intensity today has been relatively constant.
It's true.
I would support that.
We do have 8 minutes left on this stream before we will be off the air. So if you do have any more questions, please let us know. We'll be more than glad to answer them. Again, we have 8 minutes left. This is your final opportunity to ask your questions. Someone asking, what is the current category of the storm? Category 2?
2. So
Yes, 105 miles per hour.
Ooh.
So what are we saying? Possible strength winds on landfall.
Around 115, 120 miles per hour is, I think, the current prediction. Does that
You're
sound
going to
reasonable?
see at 185 miles per hour.
Well, that's not happening. 185, I know that the European said that a day or two ago. That's definitely not happening. I think that clears that up pretty quickly. Someone asking, what are your thoughts on Invest 91S? It's an
Oh,
Invest
that's
that...
a tangent.
91S has 1008 millibars, located 5.6 south, 55.2 degrees east, and wind only 20 knots.
Might form, might not, we'll see.
And the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has cancelled their formation alert for 95W for now.
Good. All right. So someone else asking, do you think an off-season storm will happen? I'd assume they're talking about the Atlantic. If the past 4 or 5 years has anything to say, a storm in May is definitely possible. Moving on from that, though, will the storm intensify more? Probably. Slowly but surely, I think it will. I think that Devin and David would agree with me.
Yep, I would agree
Yes.
with you.
Someone else asking an interesting hypothetical question we discussed a little bit earlier. If the Philippines were not in the way of this storm, would it become a Category 5?
Oh, yeah, that's the main thing, is that if there was no Philippines here, it would have enough time to strengthen in its current conditions, and it would be able to get up to a Category 5. Yeah, because it would have another good 48 hours worth of intensification to be able to get there, and I think that's what it would need. But after that, of course, it would start moving into the very hostile conditions of the South China Sea, and that would start blowing the storm apart.
Certainly. Someone asking, is the eye going to change track and hit Manila directly? No.
Well, an eye of a direct hit on Manila, no. Definitely not with conditions, I would not think. Tropical storm force conditions, 75% chance right now for Manila. But I wouldn't think that typhoon conditions are significant right now. I think signal 2 is up for Manila right now.
Yeah. I'd agree. All right, we have 4 more minutes. If you have any more questions, please let us know. I'm going to see if we have any new rapid scan imagery here. Doesn't look like it, but...
No, nothing new here, man.
Nope. But...
Actually, I do have something new.
Oh.
At least I've got it new here, and it's really, wow. The eye is getting clearer, but that slot on the western side is wide open now, and I mean wide open.
Oh, wow. So... that's good news for the Philippines.
Yeah, that dry slot is wide open.
That's really good news for the Philippines.
Yes, it is. So, hopefully that continues to hinder the storm's development, but that is That is really impressive. That is wide open now. That seems to only be getting more and more open as time continues. So, as long as that feature's there, this storm definitely will not be strengthening, to say the least. You're really going to see this turn into a curved band type structure, and then you're going to really be questioning where was the eye in the first place. So, yeah, definitely good news here for the Philippines.
Certainly. Well, we'll see what happens. Final question. Could this storm reach Category 3 or 4? Yes.
Well, it's borderline Category 3 now. 2, 3, somewhere in that region. 105 to 115 miles an hour. Anything in that, I think, would be a good, reasonable intensity estimate for the storm. Category 4 can't be ruled out. If it continues this, no. But at this time, there's no reason to believe that, at least with the pertinent conditions, it would not be able to intensify. You would think that given 12 hours of time, it would be able to get its act together and intensify to some degree before landfall. But the more the storm putzes around like this, the better it is.
That's true. All right. Well, to everyone here, to the team, thank you so much for being here, Devin and David. To the viewers, thank you so much for watching. We've enjoyed being on this stream with you, and I hope these past couple hours of coverage have been good. And we do hope to see you at the next live stream. Nathan is planning on doing a live stream tomorrow on this storm, assuming it hasn't already made landfall. That'll be at 13 Zulu, 13 UTC. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye on Force 13 social media platforms for updates on Kammuri, and keep an eye out for that live stream that will be happening tomorrow. Nathan will be hosting that. Alright, again, thank you all so much for watching. We'll hopefully see you tomorrow in the live stream regarding Kammuri tomorrow. You can follow our outlets. First of all, the website, force13.com, with new articles coming out all the time for your reading pleasure about all things weather. YouTube.com/force13 with our tropical weather bulletins, animations, and tropical updates. You can also find us on Facebook with more information on those things. And then also on Twitter. We have the US branches and AU branches on there as well, but you can see the URL below. Teespring.com/store/force13. That's where you can find things like the Smug Mug to buy. And finally, the Patreon. Patreon.com/force13, where you can support the project and help it become even better.
Force 13 has launched a merch store where you can support our project even more by showing our colours, just like this shirt I'm wearing. Or if the weather gets a bit colder, maybe this hoodie as well, of course. And of course, they go in all kinds of different varying colours. Or even pillows. I love a good pillow fight. Or even these amazing hurricane-themed phone cases. Or how about a drink out of this Force 13 mug? So you can find the wonders of Force 13's merch store online at store.force13.com. Ah! Oh! Who did that? Making its infamous landfall, Hurricane Michael is still a Category 3 as it enters the state of Georgia.